Alright, it appears to be live and such. Make sure. Alright, it appears to be live and a little bit of a noise there. Like, make sure. Yeah, better audio cable. It really should be quieter. It appears to be live and a little bit of noise there. Like, make sure. Yeah, better audio cable. It really should be quiet. Kind of funny. Sorry, entertaining myself. Stupid little freaking buttons you gotta hit. Just opening the chat window, blah blah blah. So should have done it prior to opening the room, which I usually do, but so sorry, technical difficulties and such. Not really that difficult. Just, stuff that happens when one attempts to do whatever it is this is that I'm doing. All right, so, a longer comment than I'd like. Anyway, so Bill Isaac, what's out there and how did it come to be? What is it? Question marks. I don't know if I'd say it that way. I mean, it's not really what's out there, it's what's in here. It's really, I've said before, there's only one universe, and it's actually this small universe. The little stuff is in the real universe. We're emergent property, so to speak. We're stuff that comes from the function of the little universe. All the action, everything that happens in that universe. Nothing happens in the big one, really, without happening in the little one first. All questions are better pursued with an open mind. Just cliche rubbish. Open in what sense? I should be open-minded about what? Evolution? Should I be open-minded and say, oh, no, there's only 10 million tons of evidence. I shouldn't be convinced. I shouldn't say that's a subject that's kind of over. We're done with that. We know what the religions are all fables. They all got no evidence. What does this open mind crap even mean? People say it, but what does it mean? What, you're supposed to suspend reasoning? So, and the very point, well, not the point I made in this, the video he's referring to is the electric universe one. And again, it's not that you have to have a closed mind. It's just somebody has to demonstrate something with a little bit of evidence once in a while. You can't just write fables, and that's all it looks like is a fable. It doesn't match 1/10 of the actual existing evidence as a theory. It's just it's electric. What does that mean? What's electric mean? Anyway, as to the electric universe, I'm intrigued that it does not necessarily contradict Newton. Well, I mean, the Newton didn't say much about all of physics. Newton said something about one specific thing, gravity, and he didn't even say much about it. It's just the inverse square law, pretty much, and a little bit about why orbits are ellipses. And so what does this contradict Newton thing? How are you going to contradict something so simple? I mean, the fact that orbits are ellipses and the fact that it's the inverse square law is how the force falls off. Can't contradict that. Come on. Newton himself pointed out that he can only describe some of the effects of this mysterious force. Well, I mean, in his day, I think it could legitimately be called mysterious, but in our day, we should be way past thinking this force is mysterious in the sense that it's so rudimentary in its function. We should have nailed this one a long time ago. He didn't actually know what it is. They actually did consider particle gravity back then, the SAGE. Well, it was Fadio. And, the problem is that they didn't really have a concept of this atom being made of little electrons and protons and that the force between them is the same force that we see as light. They didn't have the context that we have. Einstein went further with describing the effects of gravity. You know, he didn't go any further. He went backwards. He went to a religious answer. He went back to spooky action. He just claimed it. Spooky action. The space is bent. What does that even mean? What does bent space even mean? It doesn't even say anything. It's just such an empty statement. I have bent the space. And now that means something. How? How does it mean anything? And again, the little simple, well thing only works if you have gravity pushing things down into the well. It's a circular reasoning. It doesn't make any sense as an argument. The truth is, in 3 dimensions, it's a convergence, which means it's a little vacuum cleaner with no outlet. Somehow it's pulling, but it doesn't push anywhere else. So, it's woo as an explanation. He didn't go any further. He went backwards. Was not able to pin down what it actually is. He didn't do anything useful except give people a Jehovah answer. And they went for it, based on a false premise that he was right about gravity bending light, when that experiment was a piece of crap. Overtly a piece of crap. The state of modern astrophysics, shouldn't even be a subcategory, is one legacy, and a troubling one at that, of these 2 brilliant scientists. Well, again, in that mathematical models and thought experimentation, and through, in that mathematical models and through experimentation raced ahead of observed capacity. Well, Newton didn't do that, obviously. He didn't race ahead at all. He just says, I don't know why it does what it does. I'm just telling you what it does. And so his answer was not an answer. And clearly Einstein is the one who jumped the evidence. Only relatively recently has the golden age, so-called, of telescopic technology. Well, again, the telescopic technology hasn't done anything either that's very useful, except create more room for them to make up stories about dark matter and all kinds of other crap. The universe has more nothing than it is something, blah, 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 blah. Revealed some embarrassing observations which seem to contradict the model so lovingly held forth for years. Confirmed some stuff, created other stuff. The redshift issue, which I brought up in the recent video, but whatever. This electric universe theory would seem so far to better explain some of these observations. I don't see how you see that at all. Some silly notion that lightning bolts create craters on the moon? Do you think that makes sense? Do you think that the moon, whose surface is evenly covered, by the way, front, back, with these craters, somehow is there something electrical shocked the moon into its craters? I don't think that's a reasonable explanation at all. As an example, you might check out Premier fields, the primer fields, well, whatever. This is just crap. So fine, go ahead, believe whatever you want to believe. It's just wooey bullshit. There is no evidence for any of this crap. No volume of evidence at all. And so they're just stories. The big electrical lightning bolts that we never see did it, because somehow everything was more charged or something. It's just mush. It's nothing. There's no evidence of this crap. They just make it feels good somehow. Oh, electrical feels so much better than gravity. It's silly. So I don't know what to do. I mean, I have responded to your comment, so I'm going to delete it because it's just crap. Sorry. It's just crap. There's nothing. The electric universe doesn't have any volume of evidence of anything. All right, so double slit dip shit again. I thought he was already blocked or something, so I'll block him again. This is just absolute nonsense. Just keep going through the same routine. Even the weakest evidence is more than you have. Well, again, it's just idiotic, right? I mean, their theory doesn't unify. Their theory is full of woo and dualities, wave particle, blah, 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 dark matter, blah, blah, all this bullshit. Mine is not. Mine unifies. Theirs does not. Mine is much simpler. Mine is physical, mechanical, not wooey. No unaccounted for movements. No spooky action at any distances. And it's perfectly consistent with all the evidence, where theirs has to use things like virtual photons. They can't even explain how a magnet works. So a nonsensical starting statement. Even the weakest evidence is more than you have, which is absolutely not. So again, no, all the evidence supports my theory. There's no counter evidence except, well, it's not even counter evidence. Like I said, you could argue that the lensing evidence is insignificant because it doesn't really matter one way or the other. It's not critical to my theory, beyond saying that, yes, I would have to somehow account for why photons are a special case and the only force that gets bent by gravity. Somehow the only thing that going the speed of light that gets bent by gravity somehow happens to be photons for whatever dopey reason. And I'd just argue that obviously I don't think you're ever going to be able to prove that case, that your evidence for this gravitational bending of photons is always going to remain incomprehensibly inconsistent with reasoning. Because if you examine the mathematics, it doesn't work. And if you examine the actual evidence, it doesn't exist. So it can't get past its own margin of error. You haven't created any kind of mathematical model. So again, this argument that I somehow have to create I have to redo the formalizations of effects. When again, I'm not arguing with effects, I'm arguing about causes. So this is just a continuous, overt effort to deny my obligations, and that somehow I am going to challenge the inverse square law, or somehow I'm going to challenge the relationship between occurrence velocity, the current and the velocity and the wattage. No, I'm not going to be challenging any of those things. Those are perfectly rational observations. I'm challenging their dopey explanation that some wooey fieldy thing of magnet field and electro field is somehow creating the effect. That's what's being argued. So again, you just never are honest to what's being argued in this conversation at all. My model doesn't need math because the math has already been done. Now, I would argue that I can, but obviously, the people who've done the math over the 100 years that you've had to refine your silly wooey theory, lots of this math has been done by numerous people. And I don't have numerous people to go ahead and mathematically figure it out. But yes, I would argue that Newton's idea of the force being something where you add the two masses together is the wrong idea. Each object creates gravity. And I would argue that I could come up with the Einstein's, 40 points worth of precession change in Mercury by merely changing Newton's equation to reflect the fact that add the two forces, because the two forces aren't happening to one object. The two forces are happening to different objects. The big object affects the little object a lot more than the little object affects the big object. But they both do it individually. Both objects are affected. And if you do Newton's math that way, I think you'll come up with Einstein's answer. But I don't have, I have neither the mathematical training or time to worry about doing that for you. But I'm sorry, I will argue that your claim that I somehow can't do it or can't be done is a claim you haven't founded on with any evidence. All right, to see if it's functional and matches reality. Again, I don't have to match realities that are already well demonstrated. I'm not contesting like I said, most of Maxwell's equations are perfectly rational. What math do you say I have to change to have a different explanation of cause? I mean, on its face, it doesn't even make much sense, right? Because if I was challenging the existing evidence, then I would have to have new mathematics. I'm changing the explanation for what causes the effects. Again, how can you miss this simple fact? All right. Nor have you demonstrated any, I mean, Einstein didn't change mathematics. He just did one tiny bit of mathematics for Mercury, but otherwise he didn't change anything, right? I mean, NASA doesn't even bother with Einstein's equations because it's so superfluous, the difference. So I'm just saying Einstein didn't show up and change the world with some new mathematics. And all of his relativity math is all about stuff that we'll never be able to prove because you're never going to go half the speed of light. So you're never going to have your laser beam on your spaceship and watch the beam go crooked, which it won't do. Anyway, nor have you demonstrated a way for your theory to be tested. Well, I have pointed out clear tests where we can just once and for all decide whether this is garbage or not. Let's do the interferometer with single photons. I've pointed out different ways of doing the two-slit experiment, and certainly the radar experiment with the interference pattern, I'm claiming it's clearly just jamming the signal. There's no mystery here or woo. There's no interference, anything happening. You're just sending the same radio signal to the same location from two different sources. And obviously, they're just jamming each other. I'm saying those are all provable experiments and tests for the veracity of your assertion. You're asserting it's an interference pattern. I'm asserting no, it's just you're just jamming the two radar signals. All right, with testable predictions. So again, I've pointed out lots of things that need to be tested, and I just want you to demonstrate to me show me your beam splitter that creates two equal beams. You know, show me the logical argument where you go through a half-silvered mirror and the photons that go in between the mirror bits somehow aren't diffracted like any other single slit. Why don't you explain to me how theoretically it's possible that those photons travel through those two bits of silver that are very close together without being diffracted? So why don't you explain to me how it doesn't happen when it happens in every other case in the known universe? That it would be impossible for those two beams to be identical. You haven't done any of that. You piece of shit liar. Let's see. With testable predictions. Well, like I said, I've made lots of predictions. I predict it will be, you people will eventually figure out that photons are not bent by gravity, that there isn't any special case mathematically where you get to double the mass of a sun when a photon goes by. That somehow the mass of the sun is doubled when the photon goes by. I'm sure that doesn't happen, and you're silly to believe it does. It's just air and assertions. Well, says you. I think it's clearly rational arguments about whether you want to believe in a physical universe or some kind of little girly, wooey, Goldilocks-y, rabbit-holey world full of little friendly boo-boo characters, which apparently you like to, paint on your favorite dildo. You're the one with just freaking assertions that are always incorrect and pretty much just fundamentally lies. You keep making assertions that I've answered over and over again. Again, I'm talking about causes, not effects. What part of this is about effects? What part am I challenging the effects? Except in cases of like the interferometer, where I'm saying you're delusional if you think photons are interfering with themselves in that stupid experiment, which anyone can make. You also refuse to do Piro's laser experiment. So again, this brings up the laser experiment. I already answered this question 5 million times. The simple point is the whole reason why the laser diverges is because of the Brownian motion problem. So you have this huge error being created in the laser beam all the time. That's why we can't make a laser beam that shoots straight. It doesn't do this diverging, this sloppiness thing. It's because the sources of the laser beam are electrons, and electrons aren't in stable positions all the time. They're always jittering and in tension, and so they don't create a nice, perfect little tiny beam. So if you want to show me the laser beam that creates the nice beam over a distance, then it's worth doing the experiment. But if the laser beam's doing this, how are you going to find a millimeter difference here if the laser beam's doing this? It's not possible, idiot. And give endless excuses for why you won't do it. Well, again, as a practical matter, I just don't live in a location that makes it practical. So if I lived in a desert or I lived across a lake, or something, fine. But yeah, I live in a place with a ton of hills and a ton of trees. So you go explain to me where I do the experiment, and I'll go do it. But there's nowhere here I can do it, jackass. So anyway, I mean, I still have it set up over at the other house. All right. And so, you know, now that the leaves are almost down and the bushes are almost eaten all by the deers, I'm probably going to shoot a laser across a mirror and just see what happens again. But I mean, there's no point. There's no efficacy. There's no theoretical possibility of doing the experiment when the laser beam is diverging so much. Over the necessary distance, it's going to go from this big to this big. How can you measure a millimeter difference in this? Idiot. All right, anyway, the evidence isn't weak. Okay, so that's his claim. So I've kind of pointed out how the evidence is insanely weak, especially for the things that are supposed to be, you know, sort of raw foundational. Like I said, Einstein got the New York Times headline, Einstein right, based on an experiment that even the guy who did it admits in his own diary he wouldn't bet his life on the results. So, and then there's all kinds of, you know, once it's been investigated, that there's all kinds of chicanery that went on. The two places their results didn't agree. They threw some of the evidence away. All kinds of reasons to be very skeptical about any of that crap being real. And the very fact that the experiment's never been repeated in 100 years, nobody successfully repeated the experiment. So with all our technology, we couldn't have done a better experiment than that guy did 100 years ago. You're telling me that's a credible response. I'm saying that's an incredible, preposterous answer. So, you know, screw you. The evidence is insanely weak for your bold assertions that, oh, no one can find a better way to look at it. Well, yeah, I found it, asshole, and you're just going to be an asshole, demonstrated to be an asshole who sat here and just sit there and naysayed, okay, for no good reason. And you're going to be proven wrong. But you don't have the balls or the integrity to put your name or your face or anything on your slanderous, duplicitous bullshit statements that I've answered over and over and over again. All right. The evidence isn't weak at all, by the way. Yeah, it is. It just isn't evidence for your theory. So again, I'm saying that all the evidence does point to my theory. The only evidence that doesn't point to it is crap I don't want to point to it, which is entanglement nonsense. Experiments that have no efficacy in the sense that they're all made out of magical boxes that create. We know that it creates dual photons that are left and right photons, and it creates them at exactly the same instant. We know, when they don't know any of that crap. You know, so yes, your gravitational waves is crap. Your entanglement is crap, and it'll be proven to be crap. Time will tell, as your quantum computer never makes the shelves of Walmart. So you have to deny it. Again, I don't deny anything. This is just a bunch of horseshit. I make accusations that I back up with evidence, and you're the one who doesn't back up any of yours with anything called evidence. I've shown how the Eddington experiment results can't possibly mean much because of the impossibility of his own circumstances. The weather was horrible. He had 1/10 of the resolution he was hoping for. So it's like you're going to some place with a 16 megapixel camera and all of a sudden it's turned into a 1 megapixel camera. Get real. You support any evidence that doesn't clash with your theory. Well, again, I'm just saying all of the evidence supports my theory in the sense that all of it can be explained by my theory. It fits really well, and it's a physical theory that explains the function. It creates both attraction and repulsion by some magical mechanism for which we will never explain. That's how bad your physics is. That bad. You have nothing to. You have no right even to insult anybody else because yours is so bad. Your religion, and reject any that doesn't, like a religious person. No, you're the one acting exactly like a religious person. You're just saying faith. I believe in my wooey bullshit, and I can't demonstrate with any evidence. And my excuse is, well, it's not my fault. There's no evidence. It's God's plan. Some kind of nonsense. Why can't you give anything physical reality? And instead you have to keep making up invisible constants. And why not just put the real numbers in and quit playing this game? Why have a stupid symbol for the constant? Just put the number in, 2 times 10 to the -7th. No big deal. Why pretend it's something else is going on? So anyway, refusing to create a mathematical isn't going to win anyone over. So again, this is just kind of silly that people are sitting here saying, oh yes, okay, here's 2 explanations for gravity. One explanation is the same force like the cosmic background radiation and like photons that are invisible. You can't see them, like infrared, like all the other stuff you can't see, like X-rays. But this force is pushing everything together. Or there's some magical thing inside of every little single piece of atom that, based on how heavy it is, it pulls to the center of its gravity, some sort of space. It pulls the space in, pulls the empty space in, and somehow the planets and the other objects somehow know the empty space is gone, and they got to go where the empty space went. Yeah, I think I can make a rational argument, and I don't need anything. I don't think people are hungry for a mathematical explanation of reality. I think rational people just want something a little bit more physical in their physics. All right. Isn't going to win anyone over. Like I said, the fact that you are all religious kooks is kind of obvious. You're ignorant on politics. You're ignorant in everything. And the human race is a dismal failure. And you're an example of why it's a dismal failure, because you people can't think rationally. You can't do 2 + 2 math. And you can't be honest. And you have no integrity. You have no balls. You have no guts. You're quite the disgusting character. And you're why the human race fails. Because you have no intellectual integrity. By the way, quite the opposite. Yeah, fuck you. 8 years later, you still haven't gone beyond just making assertions. So again, I've gone way beyond making assertions, and I spelled it out for you. I've shown you the checkerboard, showed you the checkers, given you 4 rules for their function, and explained how, yes, it does do magnetism perfectly. Yeah, that's right, it does gravity perfectly. Yes, it fits all the evidence really well, because it's actually the right answer, and you idiots have sitting there believing in your little wooey invisible man forces all this time have just been duped because you were stupid. You were stupid dupes. And you don't have a, you can't be balled up man enough to admit that, oh yeah, I fell for it because everybody else fell for it. And that's the reason why you fell for it, is because everybody else did, you sheeple, you pathetic lemming. All right, making assertions in YouTube. You honestly think that list is ever going to be, and think that list is going to be swayed by this? The whole list? Yeah, no. The whole idea is to get to 11. So yes. And once there's 11, then we'll know who the real ass wipes are, who really are just religious kooks. Oh, you have a website as well, but so does every other person with an alternative theory. Well, that's not actually true, unfortunately. It would be nice if some of them actually did have some sort of coherent presentation of their arguments, but whatever. Again, it's irrelevant. The point is you haven't counter-argued. You haven't explained how I'm wrong. I can explain why flat Earth is wrong. I can explain, in a sense, why the electric universe just can't be credible, because there's all kinds of rules about how electricity travels, and it certainly doesn't like to travel through space. Space is an insanely good insulator. So it's a stupid on its face. You haven't done that, douche. Not even close. All right, so just block him. This is just too rude. I don't have to accept that. There's nothing in the video. Like I said, the video is explaining why I believe what I believe, and what I claim are not in any way deserving in a response to anything other than making a counter argument, not a bunch of accusations about what I have or have not done that are not fucking honest or correct. The single photon interferometer has already been done. Where's the evidence of it? And the paper has been shown to you. Where? That's just a lie. So go ahead and lie some more. Insanely pathetic. Where has it been done? Where? It's just a lie. Also, your internal photon engine doesn't give you any net force. Well, of course it does. That's the whole point. So yeah, it does. Well, why don't you explain why electrons can't be shot to the moon? Why don't you explain why a proton can't be shot to the moon? If velocity is inherent in these objects, and clearly every piece of matter that moves has to move, every proton and every electron has to keep moving forever through space. How do they do that, asshole? You don't have any notion of what the fuck inertia is, velocity is, or acceleration. You have no knowledge of how it works at all. You have no theory, you fucking idiot. So what is this crap that you just make a claim? Fuck you. Of course it gives a net force. I mean, quite obviously, if the right turn, the 90-degree turn, doesn't cost anything, that is, nothing moves. It's just allowing two forces to intersect with each other and create a reflection. That's all that's happening. Something going this way ends up going this way, right? And something that was going this way ends up going that way. Now, if that's all that takes place, there's nothing that moving. There's no force involved. So if the thing that's actually being turned at 90 degrees for free, because another force is causing the turn, a force you'll never see, then clearly all you're doing is pushing in one direction. So of course it does. All right, and they're in fact change their direction, and nothing else happens. So two things have their direction completely changed, and yet nothing else happens. There's no energy required for that to happen. No motion in the opposite direction. No other thing happens. This is no point. VLBI data successfully repeated it. It's a lie. Okay, so yeah, you can't post links in this rubbish comments, but you've had plenty of opportunity to post anything, and this didn't happen. So I'll copy this, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen successfully. It's just a lie. I've looked them all up. It's not there. There's no successful experiment. There's no experiment that's beyond its own margin of error. And scatter can't explain the deflection curve extends to 90 degrees away from the sun. So again, you're saying something that doesn't, your evidence is non-existent, okay? That you have this 9 degrees from the sun deflection. Based on what? Satellite data that is, again, based on your own interpretation of what the fucking data even represents. And I can show you evidence of your own, the very satellite data where it was called into question just 2 years later when with a new satellite, because the numbers were completely different. So this is not empirical evidence. This isn't strong evidence. It's insanely weak evidence. It's so bad. But the very idea that you would even think that there could be gravitational lensing at 90 degrees from frickin' any gravitational body just means you're fucking insane. Thank God. Finally, some silence. Well, just fuck off then. Fuck you. Dirty, stinking, smelling piece of crap. Your idea creates drag. Well, I just already explained it so many times. You just keep saying the same things over and over as if I haven't made the argument. And I have. So it's just the same tripe over and over. Well, I don't care. I mean, audio-visual problems. I don't, I'm pretty much done with what I had to do, but thanks for the notice. I use it. I mean, I don't know what to do about the microphone, if that's what it is. I don't know what visual problems there should be. Yeah, like that. Okay. But I'll look and see if there's anything. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong. Let's see. I can't really tell here. The YouTube window looks like the audio is working okay. So, all I see is your channel icon. Oh, okay. Somehow it lost the screen share. Don't know exactly why, but it did. No, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, I'm not planning on sticking around forever. Oh, maybe it crashed. I guess it did. I don't see it. Let's see. Oh, it's here. Fucking YouTube is a stupid cunt. That's it there. So that should work. Yeah, well, see. Not much I can do. Yeah, I don't know what it did, but it did it, I guess. Yeah, it was working originally, so it must have crashed somewhere. So it wasn't audio problems then, it was just visual problems. Right? Okay, so I'll give a couple minutes since I went to the trouble to restore the video. But I mean, again, people just aren't paying any attention. The idea that this is a unification theory. Unification is a big. Einstein went to his deathbed desperately wanting to create unification. Not a small thing, big thing. And this theory does it just beautifully. And your argument, if you're going to say it has to be wrong, well, go ahead. But you sort of have to logically explain how something so simple, such a simple theory that doesn't have any magical parts to it, that is really kind of rock solid. There's plus things, minus things, electrons do this, protons do that. I mean, it's very explicit. How something that simple could fit, explain the two most fundamental things, gravity and magnetism, and of course, by inference, electricity. I mean, magnetism is really all there is. Electricity is just a form of magnetism. It's really just a form of gravity. You know, but I mean, there's no way you could just say, oh yeah, you could make up something very simple that it could unify those two concepts, and that's really easy to do. No, that's really hard to do. Nobody else has ever done it. So you have to take it seriously just for that reason alone. That reason alone requires anybody with any intellectual honesty to say, wow, something that simple fits. Then you have to explain why it's wrong, because you can't just accidentally make it fit. It's really hard to create a theory that explains gravity and magnetism. Charge, you know, all the aspects of magnetism. So, I don't know if there's anything else to say. Yeah, I think the part 2 video was, I'm sorry, it did have a few technical issues, but I'll have to see whether those are systemic or just hard to tell sometimes what's failing when something fails. So, yeah, it did have a little bit of sketchy audio here and there. But shit happens, as they say. Guess I could see if there's any new subscriptions here. But yeah, this newest video was pretty good. All right, this is a part 2 video in the, yes, pretty good. All right. Google window. Let's see what this VLP, whatever VLB data bullshit is. Very long baseline interferometry. So somehow that is doing a single photon at a time. I don't think so. So again, I've already been to the Wikipedia page, so we've already done this shit, you know. And they just keep, so this is, we're done with radio telescopes. They use like 17 different radio telescopes, and then they attempt to synchronize their view of something and blah, 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 blah. But what this has to do with a real interferometer is absolutely nothing. It has nothing to do with beam splitting or any of this other crap. So it's just horse shit. I mean, all this stuff is also so mislabeled. I mean, they label things like a positron emission, whatever thingy, you know, some device, and it doesn't really emit positrons, and it's just part of the theory that underlies some of the stuff, but there's no real that in any of it. So it's all this time they use these words that this, you know, this has something to do with something, and it doesn't. It's so tangential to the real subject. You know, there's just no way this is the same subject at all. Hydrogen master. The data is collated and tells it can record the same signal. Again, this has nothing to do with putting a single photon at a time, or does it have anything to do with redoing the Eddington experiment? So just these fucking idiotic claims that somehow this is redoing the Eddington experiment. Not even close. These pathetic liars. So I guess that's it. So till the next time and such. So forth and whatnot.